o'clock presentation, From a Poorly Managed Cattle Farm to a Productive Ecological Paradise, a case study in rural Amazonia, Ecuador. And our speaker today is David Goucher, a former Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador and now owner and founder of Hollywood Farms. David will be speaking for about 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and there will be 10 minutes for Q&A. For people in the room, if you'd like to use the microphone when you're asking a question so the folks online can hear you. And for folks online, if you'd like to ask a question, type them into the chat and our moderator can read those aloud. Thank you again for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is David Goucher. I'm a molecular biologist with experience at the Food and Drug Administration. I joined the Peace Corps in 2005 and was sent to a absolute paradise in Ecuador, a town called San Juan Bosco. Now we're battery back. Thank you. Okay. So to put it on a map, Ecuador is due south of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that area. Our capital is Quito, and San Juan Bosco is in the Amazon region, the southeast region of a county by the name of Morona, Santiago. Population in the town is about 1,500 people. And then with the image to the left, you can see in the white square, that's more or less the location of my farm. The mountain to the right-hand side there is called Cerro Pan de Azúcar. That is literally it's a part of the Andes mountain range. So I have an immense biodiversity aspect, an incredible sources of water that just come off of this mountain. And the height of the farm ranges from about 5,000 feet to over 6,000, about 6,200 feet total. Next slide, please. Another view of Pan de Azúcar from town. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in San Juan Bosco from 2005 to 2008, and I was nicknamed Jungle Dave, hence the machete. And so I purchased the property after my Peace Corps service in January of 2008. My primary objective was ecotourism, but again, as a biologist, molecular biologist, I had no experience. I really honestly had no idea what I was doing. And with a lack of access, a 2-hour walk and 600-meter, 1,800-foot climb to get to the farm, I found it was very difficult for tourists to actually get there. The backpackers could show up, the people who were interested in climbing the big mountain could show up, but the general people of any just general visitor had a really hard time getting to the farm. And I did not have infrastructure nor resources to invest in the necessary infrastructure to make the project happen. I basically failed miserably between 2008 and 2009. And then a friend of mine said, well, Dave, you bought a cattle farm. Why don't you farm cattle? Next slide, please. So I began researching a little bit about with the Peace Corps experience. I knew that 80% of the employment in our province of Morona, Santiago is by cattle farming. The area is primarily planted with a pasture called grama lote. That is not a very good pasture all in all. It cannot withstand free range cattle such that the locals tie these cattle up, and rain or sunshine, they move them twice a day and they milk them. The soil is leached, as you can imagine, in the Amazon due to all the rain. So typically farmers give mineral salts and rock salts 2 times monthly. It's every other week they make some kind of a ball with some molasses or some honey with some rock salts, a little bit of mineral salt. So that's the only mineral nutrients that these animals get. The breeds are primarily mixed between brown Swiss and Charolais. So the results, as you can imagine, are poorly developed, malnourished cattle. And approximately 60 to 100 head of cattle are needed to maintain a small family of 3 or 4 children. And in this area, families often have 6 or 7 or 8 children. Here's another view, an aerial photo of Pan de Azúcar, the big mountain here, and the location of the farm. And so the key concepts as I began working on the farm was, one, to protect the water. I grew up in New Mexico where we do not have a lot of water. So that was always the main concept, was to protect the water, conserve the primary jungle on the property, and try to do organic production the best I could. And at the end of the day, have the best possible product, knowing that a good product will sell itself. So the productive aspects of the farm, when I purchased it, of a 55-hectare farm, only 33 hectares were pasture. There were 4 hectares of a pasture called Setaria Splendida, 25 hectares of this pasture Gramalote, and 4 hectares of swamp. And so these types of pastures, they grow really well in just standing water. And so I began a lot of irrigation works to clean out the swamps, to have running water, literally created multiple streams across the property. And at the time, there was about a half a hectare of sugar cane. 30 cattle on the farm, the average price, $600 per head. So cattle farming in Ecuador, in this area in the Amazon region, began back in the 1950s. You basically had, workers for rich landowners, massive landowners, basically working in haciendas in the Andes Mountain region. And so the national government promoted that the poor people or the workers of those types of big haciendas could basically go out to the eastern region, the Amazon region, and receive a deed if they cut 75% of the trees down and called it works. Right, and planted pasture, fruits, whatever they could, but pasture was the one for cattle. And so working became a competition out amongst the locals. The hardest worker cut all the trees down the fastest. And when I say cut all the trees down, they cut them all down. They did not leave anything for wood. They did not leave anything protecting streams or anything like that. Any steep parts, it didn't matter. They indiscriminately just cut everything down, total clear cutting. Luckily, they did not slash and burn. That is one saving grace to this whole project, was they did not do the slash and burning, but unfortunately they planted this pasture Gramalote. And this is, again, the worst pasture ever because such a short root systems, cannot handle the loose cattle. Because it doesn't have root systems, the erosion is horrible. So again, with these jungle downpours, you can just imagine how the soil just gets washed away. It needs full sunlight, meaning that the workers must go daily with the machete in hand and cleaning up all the weeds and any trees that are trying to grow back to give the Gramalote the full pasture. And it's actually a cut and carry pasture, meaning that I should go out and cut it and then have my cattle in a stable and then I feed them that way. But you can imagine 60 to 100 head, how much pasture one would carry. And we don't have roads, we don't have farming equipment. This is all done by manual labor. And so I call it equi-style cattle farming. Again, day or twice, rain or shine, twice a day, you have to go and move them. And they say that the cattle eats the pasture nice. That's why they like to plant the Gramalote. And you can imagine a tied up animal, whatever you put in front of it is going to eat it because it's hungry, And the pasture is tall. It grows over 2 meters or over 6 feet in a full year, but it takes a full year to mature. So we're in a tropical environment using a once a year type of pasture. Makes no sense. And they also say that because it takes a full year, that this is appropriate soil management. So, looking at some data regarding protein contents of these pastures, Setaria Splendida, I chose to use that because of the axis of the seeds that I had to be able to continue planting it. And at 60 to 65 days when it's mature, it's 9% protein. Another type of pasture, Tanner, 60 to 90 days, about 7% protein. Henaido, which is one of those swampy pastures, at 140 days, it's 11%, but at 60 to 65 days, it's around 7 or 8% as well. And Gramalote at 365 days is 9%. But when you look at the Setaria, the Tanner, and the Henaido at the full year, because they have all these pastures mixed up, but they only move the cattle up every year, of moving from down the hill to the top of the hill over the whole year for the X number of cattle that they have, it's all less than what it is when it's actually mature. And it makes sense. A tropical pasture, once it's, goes through this whole flowering stage, it's just fiber at the end of the day. So the protein content drops down significantly. So here's an example of Setaria recently planted. This photo, I think, was in 2010. And so this area of the farm is primary jungle. And this is all Setaria that the previous owner had planted. And so you basically have to go in, you can use a machete or a pickaxe, and you take a little piece of the Setaria out, and then you plant it. And so I planted it like a crazy man, they said. It was very, very close. But once you plant this pasture, it's done. I don't have to plant every year. Once it's done, it's done. Every 60 days, it's ready for the cattle. And again, this grows. It has very deep root system, so it prevents erosion. It grows really well, meaning the leaves are broader in shade. And so you'll see the picture coming up, what happens to how this farm developed growing trees with the pasture underneath it. And the pasture is more productive now with the tree growth than it was when there were a few trees back when I purchased the farm in 2008. I also planted some more of this panner and more sugarcane on the farm. Here is a basic design of my rotational pastures. I call it lazy farming. I set up 3 groups of cattle, and I basically rotate through these areas. And the cattle eventually learn where the doors are. So I show up, they're ready to be moved. If they still have pasture, I just yell at them, say, you still got some pasture left, and they keep eating. And so the concept here was this area near the house, I built a slaughterhouse with a cold room. And so I use this area for the finishing, where I give them more chopped sugar cane, and they're close, easy to transport there. By transport, I mean they walk there. The animals that are in the birthing process, I move them to this area because it's the flatter part of the farm. And this area is also just for with the cows with their babies that are ready to get pregnant. So I could just literally move the bull from point A to point B between these 2 groups. Once I do the weaning or the animals that are destined for beef, I move them down, and that's how I manage the farm. And so this is that picture from 2010. This was taken last week. Unfortunately, the cattle had just gone through there. But if you look, all of this area is trees. It's all covered in trees, and there's pasture underneath it. And so I now have an incredible amount of biodiversity between plant species, bird species, orchids, bromeliads, insects. All these aspects have come back, leaving the jungle. Even sometimes the monkeys are out there in the pasture with the trees there, and the cattle have more than enough to eat. I protected all the streams, and again, let naturally regrowth. I planted 500 trees, but I can't show you more than 20 of them. But I have thousands upon thousands of trees just because, again, they did not do the slash and burn. So by being a lazy farmer and not going with a machete and cutting it down, everything literally grew back. And here's a farm from another point of view of the farm. This is my quote unquote flat area of the farm. This is all done. This is about 10 hectares, 25 or about 20 acres of complete pasture. The trees are coming back. There's multiple streams through here. Using electric fences, the cows do not have access directly to the streams. In some areas, I bring a small tube with a bucket so they can drink water as they want, but they do not actually contaminate the streams. And again, thousands of trees on the farm, wonderful biodiversity. And there's a bio indicator called the crystal frog, which I'll mention here shortly, that is now present on the farm. Some cattle genetics. I'm going to go through this kind of fast. So again, these are mixed breeds. You don't see cows like this around here in the States. These are basically brown Swiss, I call them mutts, brown Swiss and Charolais lait. Brown Swiss being a milk cow, Charolais lait being meat cows. And the results, again, no marbling, no back fat. When I first bought these ones, it was taking me 3 months or almost 3 years to produce now what I'm producing in 20 months due to the weight gain. Milk cows in the Amazon area, it's just not happening. It's just not a productive area for milk. And so you only get like 5 liters per cow from 2 teats, leaving the other 5 liters for these animals. And that's the end result. They're just not, they just do not develop that well. And again, it could resulting, these are my animals, and comparing the neighbor's animals, I actually do. I don't milk my cows. So these ones were actually kind of large compared to neighbors' cows, but you can imagine the end result for the neighbors are undernourished cattle. And so I began artificial insemination with the Angus breed, Red Angus and Black Angus. Next slide. And these were crossed between Charolais and also the Brown Swiss, but inseminating using Angus. And the Charolais is the preferred breed in the Amazon region of Ecuador just because they're white, dull racist. They're happy looking cows. They are beautiful. They're tall, but meat is not where it's at. I mean, there's no marbling, there's no fat in these animals, but they do grow large. But a big issue is calves at birth are huge. They're literally over 100 pounds. And so you have a lot of birthing issues with some of these animals. And so now I began Hollywood Farms when I began, started doing cattle work. And so Hollywood Farms, obviously all the cattle have names of actors and actresses. So we have Indiana, we have Kirstie Alley with baby Gibson, Jennifer Lopez, we have Selma Hayek with her daughter Julia Roberts, and Ben Affleck with Jennifer Lopez. And so to do the artificial insemination, I use a detection bull. So this is a surgically modified bull. The way the anatomy of a bull is that their penis is a large organ here, and you can surgically move it to the side. And so they only mount cows when they're in heat, when they're ready to be impregnated. And so I had to follow, Dirk Diggler was his name, follow Dirk Diggler around what cow is he mounting, having the veterinary on call ready to come up and do the artificial insemination on the farm using the Red Angus and Black Angus straws. And after 3 years, he was very angry. He was not a happy camper because he realized he didn't have any of his children out there. And in 2015, I lucked out and a group of veterinarians had gone to Argentina for a class on embryos. And they brought back embryos, and I bought Suleiman the Magnificent here. He's a purebred Red Angus. Again, the embryo was developed in Argentina. His genetics are actually from South Dakota, and it's so much easier than artificial insemination having to follow because he does all the jobs. And their birth weights, the average birth weights of him are 65 pounds. So my cows give birth. I've had absolutely no issues at all. More actresses, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Aniston. And so these are the end results of mixing Charolais with Red Angus. And again, you have polled animals, meaning they don't have horns, very docile, very easy birthing. They do have a much wider loin compared to this guy, which is a butt. Now using crossing the two breeds, both beef breeds, you have wide loin. You can see the fat content. You don't see the ribs. And the color is obviously going more red. And when you do brown Swiss, I did not have very good results with the brown Swiss. I would say only about 20% of the animals, 1 in 5, actually showed really good Angus characteristics, meaning wide animals, wide loins. Antonio Banderas, he's a good looking guy. But out of, again, 10 or 15 that I did, only 4 came out that actually with one with really good Angus characteristics. And I had a bad day a couple weeks ago, and Susan Sarandon died. Next slide. She will live. These are her daughters with Suleiman and another one, Scarlett Johansson and Julianne Moore. Actually, I have 2 other ones that I have not had time to take pictures of. But what you obviously notice is the phenotypes, the beautiful red colors, long animals, and polled. And again, very docile animals that I raised. Newest arrivals a couple weeks ago, actually a month ago now. This is my cow, Britney Spears. She's now the most productive cow on the farm, and her new baby, Hugh Jackman. And Mila Kunis with Madonna. Madonna's not shown. And I've had multiple Brad Pitts. I always need to have at least one Brad Pitt on the farm. And you get the idea. This is Brad Pitt when he was first born. These are Brad Pitts at around 18 months. And again, you can just notice the loin, the fat, you don't see the ribs, all of them are whole. I had twins one time named Cheech Chong. And again, with the cow giving birth to 2 twins, no problems. I had no need for veterinary services or anything like that coming up. And again, notice the beautiful green pasture, Cetadia. This was a science experiment, you could say. Lou Diamond Phillips, his mom, I gave them sugar cane every 2 days. And so the cow produces more milk, and I'm not milking the cow, so he gets it all. And at about 3 months, Lou Diamond Phillips also began to eat sugar cane. And so I was able to get 420 pounds of carcass weight out of a 10-month-old bull. And he was not castrated. I should have castrated and really do the science right, but had great marbling, great back fat. So protective aspects of the farm in 2018. So 10 years later, of what was 30 hectares or 33 hectares of pasture, I lost 10, meaning I just let it regrow to protect streams and whatnot. 19 hectares, planted a lot of the Cetadia splendida. You still use 2 hectares of the swamp pastures, but again, there's streams now running there that aren't that the cattle do not have access to. And I still have a few hectares I need to plant. I planted another hectare of the sugar cane, and I still have the capacity for 30 cattle using only 23 hectares of pasture. My average price is about $1,000 per when I wean them. I don't sell too many live animals because I like to eat them. So at 16 months, I get on average 400, 450 pounds, and 18 months, 550 pounds carcass weights. Here's a view from the farm from my drone. And again, 3 groups. This is one area, this is the other area. The cattle, again, they learn where the doors are, so I can usually just show up. I'll send a drone up, make sure the pastures, you can see this area, the cattle have eaten it, you see the greenness of the pastures, so it's the whole rotation around. I put a road in 2015, 2016. And what I used to do is carry 40 pounds of chopped sugar cane in a backpack. Now I could show up with 200 pounds in my Chevy truck. And so it's a lot easier to do it that way. And this is the day that I'm moving these animals, weaning them. And where are these guys going? We're walking them down the hill to be closer to the slaughterhouse. And again, the way I handle the cattle, there are no ropes involved. I train them to follow a yellow bag of sugar cane. And that's how I bring them to wherever I need to move them, including the slaughterhouse. And so the butchering, I age all beef for at least 30 days in my cold room from 34 to 37 degrees. I do American cuts. Does anybody know a benefit of American cut versus an Argentinian cut? American cuts have bone in it. So when I sell a steak at $6 or $7 a pound, it's got the bone in it. If I were to do Argentinian cuts, I could sell the beef for more price, but then I'm left over with 150 or 200 pounds of bone. And so that's the benefit, so much benefit to do American cuts. Larger animals that I slaughter, once in a while I do have to knock out a cow. I'll age them for 45 to 60 days. It does include, or does improve the flavor and the tenderness. And I did a science experiment and left a side of beef 6 months. And I mean, on the outside, it was definitely funky looking, but removing all the trim and cutting into it, it was excellent beef. But talking with my clients, they said it's not worth the extra effort, the extra time, nor the extra price. So normally it's between 30 to 40 days is my average aging the beef time. Okay, sorry. And other aspects of the farm, I do lamb, they're politicians, guinea pigs, House of Representatives, rabbits are the Supreme Court, chickens are rock stars, this is John Bon Jovi, and the turkeys are just local politicians. And the Peace Corps volunteer in San Juan Bosco was out there in 1966. The main street is named after him. And so here we're eating the turkey, which was the previous mayor, Christian Sakiseva. The lamb is by far the best meat that I produce. At 11 months, I'm getting about 9 to 15 pounds per month weight gain, depending if it's a male or a female. I get easily $6 a pound, and I have 2 clients for all my lamb. They're fighting each other for it. So it's a great, I highly recommend it if you have cattle farms as well, that you look into producing lamb as well. It's by far easier. And the butchering, I only do 6 pieces. I basically divide it down the spinal cord. I don't do the fancy French cuts or anything like that. I just sell them the whole 6 pieces, and it's gone the day that I can. Every time that I have one, I sell it pretty quick. Again, American cuts. I have expat clients in Cuenca. City's about a 500,000 people in just south of Quito, or 30-minute flight from Quito. It's been voted the best retiring place for many years now. And so I have 20 to 30 clients, and I usually slaughter 1 a month. And between 20 or 30 people, I can get rid of an entire beef. And there are around 5,000 expats in Cuenca, 7,000 if you include the surrounding cities outside of Cuenca as well. And so I do all the steaks cut to order. If they want an inch thick, an 1.5 inch thick, however size roast, I do my own butchering for them. I also do the ground beef with determined amounts of fat. I have the people who want to live forever, who don't want any fat in their ground beef, and then I have the diehards who want all the fat that I can put in there. So. And this is me being me. I also get contracted by local governments, municipalities, to give talks about beef production. This was me back in 2018. The county over, Limon y Danza, they hire me for their county fairs. And so I usually bring up a side of beef, if not, whole beef. Pieces, whatever they want, and then give the whole talk about what I do, how I run the cattle. And based on this kind of work, this began my agritourism, and it's like after I started doing these kinds of talks and whatnot, the locals wanted to come to the farm and visit the farm. And so I began actually doing agritourism as a side, job based on the beef production. And so in Limon y Danza, for their county fairs, we now do Res Fest. Res is beef. And so basically, these 2 years, they bought animals off my farm. And we have 4 local chefs, and they cook the entire animal. Like we're eating an entire 400, 500 pounds of beef in a day. And they know all the recipes, the osobucos, the ground beef, the burgers, the ribs, all that. And so it's so far been a great success. And this year the county fair is in December, and we're already planning to do it over a 2-day period. So it'll be 2 animals. And I'm promoting that. I do not want them to buy my beef. I want them to promote local, meaning people from Limon y Danza, that they do this. They use the Red Angus breed. They let their cattle loose. They feed them sugar cane to produce a fine product. In Limon y Danza, there is a municipal slaughterhouse, and they have all that service. And so I'm promoting that, that the locals should kind of pick this up as well, and as terms of the productive aspects. Implementing agritourism, again, it began with the locals interested in my Red Angus breed, and I was offering half a day's orders for $5 or $10 with lunch. And I've had so many politicians in the Ministry of Agriculture want to come up and work with me, and I'm kind of like, why? I'm already done. I got everything figured out, So there are several restaurant owners as well that will come up and visit the farm. And again, I have my 20 or 30 clients in Cuenca well established. And so the restaurant owners want the T-bones. They want the prime ribs. And so I tell them, you have to buy a side of beef, and you figure out, I'll cut it for you however you want, but I'm not going to lower my price unless you buy the volume to make my life easier. And to keep my clients happy, I will implement, again, sort of every once in a while I can slaughter up to 2 a month. So taming the cattle with agriculture. So this is when I started actually receiving tourists on the farm and began the farm tour with the tourists. Again, sugarcane and mineral salts is this is my friend Greg Kluskins from Belgium visiting the farm, and he's there with Britney Spears. And I only do this when the animals are already about 2 months old, because it's when a newborn baby and mom, sometimes they just have different ideas. And so I always do the whole risk assessment saying, you know, these animals, you have to understand they're bigger than us. You have no idea what's going on, but you see the electric fence line, they know where the line is. Greg is safe, Britney Spears is cool. So usually only work with the ones that I know have a good temperament. And here are some people just don't want to get close to the animals, so they stay afar. But there I'm showing how I lasso Britney Spears. I walk up and put a rope around her when I want to, you know, because they ask that question, how do you, if you need to get them, how do you do? And normally I just have them follow literally the bag of sugar cane, and they will follow me wherever. And so here we are with the young girl petting Kirstie Alley. And again, this is the Red Angus polled, so very docile animals. And so the final results, what I'm doing now is I have people coming to visit the farm. They visit the cattle, they do this farm tour. I have them select the steak that they want. Sometimes when I have it aging in my cold room, we can go walk in there and just cut, you know, cut a rump roast, cut the eye of the round out fresh right there. And then we cook. And so they enjoy the produce. I also have fruit and vegetable production. These I can grow year round, type of lettuce with these types of cherry tomatoes and kind of like a gooseberry that grows down in south. It's called uvillas. And so with that in and of itself is a fine meal, and I charge vegans and vegetarians, I charge them more. And here's some pictures of the locals. Guinea pig is, we also offer guinea pig. That's a delicacy in Ecuador. And so we have all of the setup. If they don't want me to cook for them, I offer that they can rent the downstairs kitchen for $10, and so they can bring up their own chicken or their own meat, and they can basically cook for themselves there. And so another aspect as a biologist that I'm big into is looking at the genetic aspects. And now we know everything about Wagyu beef. And so factors increasing quality grades. Again, I mentioned that I was always going for the best product, and the best product is Angus beef. When we go to a restaurant here in the States, it's always Angus certified beef, right? And so there's more and more data showing that I did the right thing because the quality of the beef, when you mix Charolais, this is a Charolais, which almost has no fat, no marbling. When you mix Charolais with Red Angus, I get very similar results to this. And within one generation, I'm now working on the 3rd generation Red Angus. I'm getting more back fat, more improved marbling. The weight gain is right there compared to the Charolais bulls or the Charolais animals. And the marbling that I do is with sugarcane. So I do not feed them corn. I have a sugarcane chopper, and this is much more, it's much easier for them to digest in their rumens because it's plant matter. It's not a grain. So I have now had, I did Jungle Dave's tours back in 2008 when I bought the farm or when I purchased the property. But now because I'm doing the beef production and now I have the road access, now I have all the infrastructure, I can now be Jungle Dave's tours and offer tours to the property. I have a waterfall on the property. We have a house where we receive guests for overnight stays. We do birding. This is a viewpoint of the mountain Pan de Azúcar. And so I offer a bunch of different activities all over the farm. And one aspect that we do, that I do is a tour looking for the crystal frog at night. And so this is the bioindicator, crystal being, because you could see through it, you can literally see the heart beating, the digestive process in action. And in 2008, Spanish biologists visited the farm when I recently purchased it. They were unable to find it. They looked all over the farm. They found it in other areas higher above my property, in parts of my property where there was just primary jungle. And now it's found in abundance across the farm. So all of the streams are now much cleaner than they were when I purchased the property back in 2008. And again, these are their presence indicates directly the absence of contamination in the water, in the streams, and in their habitat. I also do these science tours where we're looking at insects. I've been working with the University of Ushuaia, University in Cuenca, and they come out to do studies, and they're estimated to be at least 50,000 species of insects on my property, and definitely some have yet to be discovered. And I do tours at night with fluorescence, so you can see the scorpions, and a number of insects do fluorescence. We're constantly stopping and looking at the different insects, and I try to explain to them the biological importance in the whole ecosystem. And birding, this is also a huge new, push down on my farm. Just from my porch, I've seen 115 species of birds. Total on the farm, about 168 now, and there we have estimated there are going to be about 225 bird species on the farm. And so planning touristic activities, and again, I did this totally backwards, so anybody who's beginning this whole process is thinking about it, you really have to answer these simple questions for thinking on the tourist. Where am I going? What am I going to do? What will I eat? Where will I stay? And also, how am I going to get there? And so if you have some aspect, one of those questions, you still have to answer the other questions. So you can say, this is the bus, this time the bus comes in, this is the plane flight, this is the taxi driver, this is where you're going to stay if you don't offer the actual hotel service or whatnot. And so all these things must be answered for the tourist to have a good time. And if you can provide the services, great. Obviously, it's more of an economic impact for your wallet if you can provide more of these services. But if not, dedicate to answering one of those questions. What will they do? What will they eat? Something like that. And then, but you must have all the other things answered as well. And I highly recommend that you take advantage of these ecological aspects in your area, be it the birds, be it the insects. If you have a university nearby, students are free labor at the end of the day. Some of them are looking for the experiences. I've been working with Zach Smith. He's brought several groups down to my farm, and we've worked well together throughout the years. And again, I look forward to meeting, having more of these types of inter-exchanges between students and what I got going on the property. And my take-home lessons, again, I did it wrong. I should have done the road first. That was it's a no-brainer. I worked way too hard to get everything up and running before that. And tourism is much more complicated than I anticipated. I totally prefer to cattle. And remember, I bought the farm or purchased property for tourism. But at the end of the day, I do prefer the cattle. And I use locals for the harder stuff, and as Mario said in his talk, you benefit, everybody benefits, you have the local people who are helping you with the transportation or whatnot. And so everybody benefits in San Juan Bosco by me having tourism in the farm. Hiking up the big mountain, I've done it 5 times. I'm happy if I never have to do it again, but I have local guides who can do it. They're young kids, they have their Ministry of Tourism certificates and whatnot. I try to use local transport and their 4-wheel drive pickup trucks as well to bring people to my farm. Try to hire people to help me cook, help me clean. And so I get to do the fun stuff, which is at the end of the day, the farm, the agritourism tour. I really enjoy that aspect of it. I like the night tours as well. I always see something new. And so at the end of the day, it has been a great positive economic impact that was just kind of a side product of all the work that I did. So thank you.
Come to the microphone in the middle of the person.
Probably. Just wondering about the splendida, that grass.
Yeah.
Like, how do your neighbors react to that? Because you're saying you're growing more biomass under trees.
Yeah. They have it, but again, to them, it's not the good pasture because the cows don't eat it pretty. That's the way they literally say it. And why? Again, because they let it mature a full year. And so it's just fiber, it doesn't have the protein content. And, they've come to my farm, and to them to see trees, I ruin the farm, because they still have the mentality that the hardest worker doesn't have trees on his farm, and so they see the results, they eat the beef, they understand, but do they actually implement these types of things? Not yet, and we're probably 4 out of, I don't know, maybe 200 cattle farmers. 4 of us have dedicated to this type of cattle production. Two of them still do milk cows, Holstein breeds, but they are dedicated to that breed. And the others, again, I'm president of a foundation working with environmental education in the high schools. And so I'm going after the kids and the grandchildren. Saying you guys obviously don't want to go up and move your cows twice a day when you graduate high school. Here's how you could do it. And I invite them to the farm and I show them, and I try to employ them to help me with the pasture planning and teach them, motivate them and whatnot. And so there are some, but they don't own the farm. It's still dads or granddads. And so they're not, they're not able to step in and say, okay, I'm going to manage this farm. Right.
Is that type of grass widely adapted? Like it could be spread and available in other countries? And
yeah, I'd imagine, I mean, in tropics, it definitely would not do well in Vermont.
No.
But yeah, I think I know that it's in Africa. I know that it's, in basically every tropical country in South America.
Central America?
Central America as well.
Huh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. How do I market myself? Word of mouth or social media? It's usually both. Again, I email 10 clients when I have beef, and they let the other 10 or 20 clients know that I have beef, and then I get the emails saying what you got, how much, when. And so and then marketing, I don't market beef online. I do have a Hollywood Farms webpage, but I only send that to my clients, and some people have shared it, and when they say, do you have beef, it's like, if you're not on my list, I sometimes don't even reply. But yeah, the word of mouth for the tourism aspect is definitely that, and me working with those clients in Cuenca. I'm after not necessarily the retirees, but I'm wanting their children and grandchildren to come to the farm. And so when our summertime is now August through December, and so now is when I'm there saying, if your kids are coming down for Thanksgiving, think about sending them out my way, or your grandchildren want to come out for a weekend, I'll be there. And so it's a joint thing between the word of mouth and the tourism aspect. I do have some social media working as well.
Two questions. I'm a cattle farmer and I'm also a forestry person.
Excellent.
On our farm. So with your pasture that you say does well with some trees and some grass under it, at some point in time, will you need to well, here's the question. Will the trees regenerate if the cattle are out there grazing? That's one question. The other is, if you choose to keep that in pasture, then do you need to control the trees a little bit? Because the trees may over canopy the pasture.
Yeah, that's great questions. And so what I've found is certain tree species are definitely weaker than others. Mm-hmm. And again, I have the root systems there. And so within 6 months in the jungle with sunshine, they grow fast.
Right.
And so some cows, when they, start scratching, they'll knock them down, but they keep growing. And so within about 3 or 4 years, I found, several species that are in abundance and other species that, I need to help them out. So in a couple of the pastures, I've done extra electric fencing to protect areas, but within a year, we're good.
But will the trees over canopy your pasture at some point?
What I have to do is I do
a little bit of control.
Yeah. And just because of the lower branches, I want them to be able to get in there. You know what I mean? And there's other ones like some berries and things like that are growing that I kind of have to control because they could scratch the cattle's faces and whatnot. But what I started with at the beginning was I just let everything grow. And now 10 years later, I'm finally going back, and kind of pruning the trees. And getting rid of some that are just too many of said species. I can knock a couple of those down for firewood or whatever, needs and posts, do it that way. But the other trees that I planted were like laurel and cedars and jungle mahogany and things like that. And root systems of the native trees didn't let them grow. So
So the other question was, when you talk about how you age your beef after you butcher it, you said something about how much you need to trim if you go 60 days, or I don't remember what number you had said, but you didn't say about the 40 days. So we age meat only like 20 days, 24 days. We don't personally, but the slaughterhouse that does it for us.
Sure.
So I'm curious, at 40 or 45 days, how much trim do you get?
I
It
would
varies
say-
on the animal, I
I'd
know,
say it's
but
5%, on the outside, there's definitely some of the membranes that we have to get rid of, and, the bone on the
Mhm.
spinal cord, I usually have to shave a
Mhm.
eighth of an inch off either side.
Yeah.
But I mean, I raise my prices, like if I know that I'm aging,
Compensate for it.
and my clients have no problem that it's 25 cents more per pound or
Yep.
whatever to account for that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I am the best quality control there is. I know this needs a week, and one more week or 10 more days or it's ready to go. And so with the delivery schedules, I slaughter, leave it for the 30 days, deliver one half, leave the other half aging for another week or
Okay.
two. And then deliver. So there's between the 30 and 45 days per animal side by side. And so again, the second side, that's 45 each day, there's about a 7 cents per pound increase
Mhm.
on the price across the board. And sometimes I just jack it up 10 cents to make it easy. So, yeah.
So you see some difference in maybe in the tenderness, just going from like say 24 days, maybe to 45 days or so. That is it a remarkable difference?
To me, the 20 to 30 day range, it's better to leave it for the full 30.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then the 30 to 45, minor differences, definitely a little more flavorful. Tenderness is about the same. But there is a little bit more trim associated with that. After about 18 days is when the things start growing. And so I don't use glacial acetic acid or anything like that. I try to just leave it as is, knowing that, again, I could take that membrane out without a problem. And anything that's growing on the outside, give it a quick wipe down and good to go.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I just have a question. I'm impressed with your operation, first and foremost, but I would just like to know, because this seems to be an issue that we have in the farming world, right? With your operation, do you have a contingency plan? As to say that, well, if anything happens to you or when you passed on, because you seem to have a great operation, your knowledge is wide. So do you have a contingency plan to put in place after you go to continue this good work?
The foundation, Conciencia Amazonica, we're going to split off another foundation called Conserva Amazonica, basically conserve the Amazon. And in that foundation that I'm going to set up, I'm basically going to donate my farm to this foundation when I pass. And the goal of the Conserva Amazonica is to purchase the primary jungle and areas that need to be reforested of my neighbors. And so I'm actively, proactively looking for funding to do these types of projects. I have some money coming in to begin, but that is kind of my current plan. At some point in time, I realized that I might not be able to do all this work, but I've set it up again such that I can send my drone up to find my cows. That's great. I got a pickup truck that I can drive up to look at them, and right now my friend is going up to my farm every 3 days, and it's not necessary every 3 days. I'm just taking care of my dog and a couple of smaller animals, but the cattle in and of themselves is kind of like a 1 hour per week per group job. And I think I can maintain that for a couple more years. And at some point in time, I'm really hoping that Angus replaces Charolais, because the only reason I'm in this is so I can eat some really good beef. And at some point in time, when the neighbors have the really good beef, then I can then go back to dedicate to science, or have less cattle, and basically try to sell the reproducers, the bulls and the heifers, as opposed to doing this whole beef process. But yeah, the contingency plan basically for the farm is to make it a kind of a private reserve that's being run by the foundation, which will have environmental lawyers, biologists, environmental engineers that are also running the show. So.
I just wanted to say thank you. This is quite impressive. Your perseverance to have created this from 2008 and created what you did today, have at this time, is pretty amazing. You didn't give up. You found systems to make them work. It's just very impressive. I think this is one of the things that farmers are always trying to do, and you found a way to do it. And I really enjoyed this and I gained a lot of information. And the only question I have is, do you ever have to deal with any kind of predators? You know, are there, yeah,
So on the farm, obviously with 30 hectares of primary jungle in the Amazon, I do have the puma. But luckily the puma has wild boars, has 3 species of monkeys, has a bunch of things that the puma can eat that has not, to knock on wood, have not had any issue with the puma coming. It's on my property, it's in its area, and it has not, come down and interacted with the cattle. It's walked along the roads. I have some wildlife cameras placed up there for security, as well as seeing where the wild things are, what's going on. And we've got the puma, and we're, it's kind of like a mountain lion kind of puma, walking there. But now again, luckily, I have had no issues with that. And at some point, and again, neighbors have had issues, but they're actively hunting in their property. So they're taking away what the puma needs. And so that's part of the foundation that I work with, is all this environmental education, that the reason why the puma is attacking your babies is because you're killing its food. If you stop hunting, then they're going to have, more that they need, and they won't, they'll stop attacking your cattle. And so, that's snake bites every once in a while.
Yep.
But again, I have the vets on call, and so they can come up within an hour and, do what kind of mitigating circumstances that arrive to help me out with that. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very impressive.
thank you.
Thank you, very inspiring. I'm Peruvian, so your story touches my heart. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the guinea pigs, the quiz. How do you manage them? Who is, whether it's just for selling to the tourists that reach your, everything. I've never heard about raising cuyes in the Amazon.
Sure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So guinea pigs, again, they're a delicacy in Ecuador as well as Peru. You guys know how to cook them better than Peru than Ecuador. So that gramalote pasture, that's the most common pasture. That's, you cut them and give that to the guinea pigs. I planted, it's called elephant grass. So it's massively tall, 35 days. It's literally 5 feet, 5.5 feet tall. And I do that chopped with sugar cane. And so they get fat, they're overfed as well, just like all the other animals. And I don't have a whole lot of guinea pigs because they do get complicated, do breed. And I am a lazy farmer. I don't want to have to take care of guinea pigs every day. And it's definitely for more of the tourism aspect and then personal consumption. Every once in a while, the mom eats a baby, and that's because she's lacking minerals. And so there's types of balanceados or feeds that I don't give because they're not organic by any means. And so, but I do give them, believe it or not, some beef bone meal every once in a while. I'll drop a little bit in there in the water, especially, and just have a small little amount with the beef bone meal, and you can see how they go with that. But I mean, that's maybe once a month. And we're doing that, I kind of have not had too many issues with that. So.
What about housing?
Housing, that's a good question. So I have problems with the neighbors' dogs. And so it's very similar to a chicken coop. It's, off the ground, and I use like chicken wire. So their poop kind of waste falls down, and that's wonderful fertilizer for the greenhouse. And any leftover lettuces or things like that from our meals, the guinea pigs get as well. And I cover it with just a wood with hinges. So, and they like quiet. They do not, I have them far away from the sugarcane chopper. And so they're in an area where they can, they have a decent size area to run. And then I have, the male, which I can drop in with the females when they're ready. Moms with their babies are apart. And I think it's Zach, is it every 26 days? You can get up to 4 guinea pigs or something like that. Yeah, but they're not as good as rabbits, but I mean, they're pretty pretty reproductive. So.
And another thing about the Amazon, cuy isn't too popular in or outside of the highlands, but the people in San Juan Bosco are from the highlands.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, so that tradition definitely stuck, so, yeah.
There's a question in the back. We have it online.
Good afternoon. I'm Hani from the Philippines, and I'm really awed by how you infuse creativity in your farm. It's raw, it's bold, but exciting.
Yeah.
But my question is, because I teach in a university, I teach young college students. What would be your advice to young farmers who would like to engage in cattle farm tourism, but they don't have the kind of creativity that you have? Thank you.
What I did, again, I had zero cattle farming experience, but it wasn't bad because, but I had friends from high school. Again, growing up out in New Mexico, they have Herefords, literally, I think it's 40 acres per head, roaming out the deserts, you know what I mean? It's bad. And so I asked them, what do I do? And they were like, Angus, don't screw around with any other breeds, just do Angus. Started talking to them, and I knew things about the plants and pastures and whatnot, and they were like, well, if you're in the tropics, then look for the fastest possible one, but then the fastest possible one doesn't grow at the altitude of my farm, and so failed there. And they said, well, look for next best thing. And then they basically said, well, what do you have on the farm? And then, oh yeah, I have the Cetaria splendida, and so looked into that and said, that's got the protein I need. It's 60 days. 6 rounds a year, I'm good to go. And so research at the end of the day. And one, don't be afraid to try something new. The neighbors, again, they're still moving their cows. Well, I'm not, and I'd like them to not move their cows, but it's up to them. I can't force them. But one thing is, definitely, especially with the young mentality, is to use that young mentality and try different things. And the marketing aspect, I mean, how funny it is when I show up with pieces of Brad Pitt in a plastic bag to sell people. So those kinds of marketing schemes, that always helps. And looking at, I never did a real market study or a feasibility analysis because there was no good beef when I started. So again, having the end result of being the best product, that should be step one. Environmental protection, all that should be another priority. And because these are all aspects that if you get into the agritourism aspect of it, it's nice telling the people, if you want to go jump in the stream, feel free to, it's clean. If you want to drink the water, just make sure you're not drinking a crystal frog that might be in there, because they're there, and so all those aspects I highly, recommend, and that they, again, take advantage of, if they're in the university, if there's a biology department, that they do scientific tourism of the farm or of their areas. They learn all these aspects of birds, of what, what's the big, the other big dragonfly tourism is another big thing up and running that, I'm going to get in with the University of SY to help to get students out there to help me show me what I got. And so those kind of, ideas. And again, that they should never be afraid to try something new.
The last question will be the online. I'd like to know what the land acquisition process is, that some sectors in the Amazon region are protected and stewarded by indigenous.
So the question, did you hear the question? No, so the question was about the land acquisition in the Amazon region, and that some areas are under like government protection. We have indigenous groups with their own lands, and that's like communal property, and I could never buy that. But like I said, in the 50s, when the government promoted people to go out there to destroy the jungle, and then they gave them the deed, I bought one of those pieces of property that got the deed after destroying the jungle. And the only reason why I still had the primary jungle on that property was because the owner realized that this whole hill, you're talking massive jungle trees on top of a little bit of clay on top of massive rocks. There's no topsoil. Everything was just roots, but there was no real topsoil. So he was like, why am I going to continue destroying if the pasture is not going to grow there? And so he just did 2 smaller sections and lied, saying, oh, someday I will knock all that down and do it, but he was able to get the deed for the entire hill, the entire property. And so my aspect, and if anybody's interested in these kind of things, make sure they have a legal deed. And because there's a lot of people who have by possession, and that's a hassle to try to deal with, because if there's no legal deed in hand, it's just their word against the government or the neighbors or whatnot. And so again, my acquisition was very smooth. I knew the guy. I worked with him when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, promoting that he maintain the jungle and promote tourism through there. And it's just one of those conversations that we had at the end of the day. He said, well, why don't you just buy the place and you can do what you want? And 2008, I'm leaving the Peace Corps, and it's like, I'm gonna go talk to that guy and see if it's still available. And I think I made the right choice. Thank you.